In the depths of human existence lies a truth that can liberate us from the shackles of suffering. Suffering is born not from external circumstances, but from internal resistance. To break this vicious cycle of emotional pain, it is necessary to realize that it is not the events themselves that cause suffering, but the struggle against what is. Most people, without realizing it, spend their lives in endless suffering, not because of the cruelty of life, but because they unconsciously keep themselves in this spiral. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "What you resist persists." This phrase is not just a beautiful saying, but a deep psychological and spiritual principle capable of changing lives. Imagine when something unpleasant happens, a natural reaction arises: sadness, anger, or disappointment. However, true suffering arises not from the event itself, but from internal resistance, from thoughts like, "This shouldn't have happened. I can't handle this. This is unfair." It is this non-acceptance that turns pain into endless torment. The root of suffering lies in the human mind, striving for control. We want everything to go according to plan. We want to avoid pain. We want the world to function according to established rules. But life does not follow these notions. When reality contradicts expectations, resistance arises. And this is the essence of suffering, the constant struggle with the inevitable. The experiences after a breakup are a natural part of life, when emotional pain can torment you for weeks or even months. However, if suffering stretches on for years, it indicates that you are stuck in the past, clinging to memories and idealized notions of how things should have been. A similar situation arises with any loss, betrayal, or failure. The destructive impact is not from the event itself, but from your internal struggle with it, the unwillingness to accept what has happened. So how do you break this vicious cycle? This is where a spiritual principle comes to the rescue, capable of radically changing the situation: radical acceptance and mindfulness. Acceptance is not humility and not approval of what happened. It is the rejection of resistance, the cessation of the struggle with reality, and the redirection of energy to what you can truly influence: your reaction. When you accept a situation, something amazing happens. The burden of suffering begins to diminish. Not because the pain disappears, but because you stop feeding it. Imagine a person who has lost their job. If they wallow in anger and take on the position of a victim, they may spend years blaming the world and feeling unfairly offended. But if instead they accept what happened and ask themselves, "What can I do now?" they will regain control of their life and turn pain into a stimulus for growth. It's all about your perception. Carl Jung often spoke about the importance of integrating even negative experiences. After all, pain that is accepted becomes wisdom. It is a mistake to believe that our sufferings are unique and that no one has experienced anything like it. Pain is an integral part of the human experience, which sooner or later everyone experiences. The only difference is how we deal with it. He who fights pain is doomed to suffer. He who accepts it gains an opportunity for growth and development. If you really want to heal, stop the war with life. Accept the past, accept what you cannot change, and turn your gaze to what is within your power. It is amazing how often we overlook a simple truth. The main weight of our torment stems not so much from life's adversities themselves, but from our painful attachment to the pain experienced. Remember how a past relationship poisoned your existence for years, and it was not only the fact of the breakup itself, but your inability to let go of the past. Or how someone's betrayal left an unhealed wound, and you could not forgive the offender, not so much because of the act itself, but because of the persistent desire to cherish anger within yourself. True freedom comes only when we stop desperately resisting the inevitable. Remember the missed opportunity that haunted you for a long time. But after all, you were held back not so much by the loss itself, but by the obsessive idea of how everything could have turned out differently. It is the rejection of resistance, the cessation of the struggle with reality, that leads to the extinction of suffering. This does not mean the instantaneous disappearance of pain, but you stop feeding it, and over time it turns from a heavy burden into a valuable lesson. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Next, we will delve into how our subconscious, like a ruthless director, forces us to reproduce the same scenarios of suffering over and over again, and we do this completely unconsciously. After all, as soon as the realization comes that the root of our torments lies in our resistance, a natural question arises. Why do we step on the same rake again and again, even though we know perfectly well how to avoid pain? The answer to this question opens our eyes to the fact that we have far more power over our lives than we ever imagined. Our subconscious, like a skilled programmer, creates the conditions for painful situations to repeat. If you still believe that suffering is something that just happens to you, it is time to face the truth. The truth that is not usually spoken aloud is that we ourselves, unconsciously, play out this performance again and again. Not because we like to suffer, but because our subconscious is so used to, leading us down the well-trodden path of pain. As Carl Jung aptly put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This means that the pain you experience time and time again is not an accident, not the machinations of a malicious fate, and not a conspiracy of the universe against you. It is the result of deeply rooted emotional and mental patterns that you unconsciously reproduce. Our subconscious, like software installed in our early years, shapes our perception of the world. If, as children, we learned that love is inextricably linked to pain, that partings are inevitable, and that the world is full of hostility, these beliefs become deeply ingrained in our psyche. It is important to understand that the subconscious does not strive for our happiness. Its goal is to reproduce familiar scenarios. Therefore, even sincerely wishing to get rid of suffering, we repeatedly find ourselves in similar situations. We notice that we enter into relationships that cause pain, or that every bright event in our life invariably suffers a collapse. There is a sense of déjà vu, as if we are experiencing the same events over and over again, despite our promises to change the course of things. This is not an accident, but a pattern, due to the subconscious's desire to reproduce familiar patterns of behavior. If as children we learned that love is accompanied by a feeling of abandonment, then in adulthood, unconsciously, we will be drawn to partners who evoke these very feelings. Not because we crave suffering, but because our mind seeks the familiar. If we experienced rejection or humiliation as children, we may avoid new opportunities as adults for fear of repeating the negative experience. We prefer to stay in our comfort zone, even if it means continuing to live in a painful state. The most difficult thing is that, without realizing this pattern, we will repeat it throughout our lives, taking it for an inevitable fate. Many people complain, "I always meet the same type of people. I'm constantly in the same situation. Life is unfair to me." However, it is not a matter of bad fate, but that we ourselves, unconsciously, reproduce the same internal process. The key to solving the problem lies in awareness. It is impossible to change what we do not see. Therefore, if we really want to break out of the vicious circle of emotional pain, we must first of all realize exactly what pattern we are constantly repeating. What kind of shadow of painful experiences haunts you on your life path? Is it rejection, like a brand burned on your heart? Or a bitter feeling of abandonment when the world seems hostile and alien? Maybe it's betrayal, a stab in the back from those you trusted, or a crushing frustration when efforts are shattered against a wall of failure. Or maybe a chilling fear, paralyzing the will and mind. Only by realizing this can you break free from the vicious circle of suffering. Think about what types of relationships or circumstances you repeatedly find yourself in. What story do you tell yourself, about the world, that keeps you in the shackles of torment? By answering these questions, you will face a harsh truth. The source of your suffering is not in the external world, but within you. It is what you carry within yourself and unconsciously project onto the surrounding reality. Breaking this vicious circle of emotional pain does not mean getting rid of sadness or disappointment forever. It means ceasing to be a hostage to a recurring scenario that plays out in the depths of your subconscious. Awareness of this unconscious programming deprives it of its power over you. You cannot avoid pain in life, but you can stop cultivating it. You can choose a conscious life, not an existence on autopilot. Next, we will delve even deeper and consider the role of the ego in maintaining your suffering. We will learn how to disarm it so that it no longer sabotages your life. Understanding the functions of the ego will open the way to regaining control over your destiny. If you really strive to break the vicious circle of pain, learn the main thing. Your ego is the main stumbling block on the path to healing. Inside us, a voice sounds, convincing us of the right to be offended, of the injustice of the world, and of the need for changes in others in order to find peace of mind. However, behind this facade lies a stark reality. The ego is not interested in our healing, as suffering is its source of existence. As Jung said, the mind that created the problem cannot solve it. It is the ego, this internal source of suffering, that prevents healing, fueling the pain we seek to escape. The ego skillfully manipulates us, not openly declaring the need to suffer. It convinces us that there are valid reasons for negative experiences, holding us captive in resentment and disappointment. The endless listing of grievances and injustices of the world creates an illusion of control, but in reality, only strengthens the shackles of pain. The ego allows us to identify with suffering, subtly shaping our self-definition through the prism of pain. Phrases like, "I always get dumped," or "I'm never taken seriously," only reinforce a negative self-image, making us believe that the source of problems is outside of ourselves. The ego whispers that others are to blame, that life owes us something, and that only a change in external circumstances will bring relief. But this is a trap, forcing us to wait for change from the outside instead of recognizing our own inner potential. The ego thrives on conflicts, comparisons, and unhealed wounds, which it constantly reopens. One of the most insidious ways the ego sabotages us is by playing the victim. Immersed in a victim mentality, a person believes that all the troubles in their life are caused by external factors or fate. This defense mechanism is actually a renunciation of one's own power. Convinced of the lack of control, a person refuses the opportunity to change the situation. This is exactly what the ego wants, to keep us in a state of weakness, helplessness, and suffering. In the harsh reality of life, each of us is alone in our struggle. No matter how deep our suffering, how loud our complaints, or how often we look for someone else to blame, salvation will only come from within. It is you, and only you, who can break the vicious cycle of self-destruction. The first step to freeing yourself from the shackles of the ego and regaining control of your destiny is to realize a simple but profound truth. You are not your ego. You are not your pain, not your past, and certainly not that nagging inner voice that tries to convince you of your eternal role as a victim. The ego clings to our suffering like a parasite feeding on it. It is pain that sustains its existence. But as soon as we stop feeding this pain, the ego begins to lose its power, to wither. Here are 3 effective ways to break through the ego's control and start a new life. 1. Become an observer of the voice in your head. Whenever the ego tries to remind you of old wounds, to instill the idea of the injustice of the world, just observe this voice from the side. Do not identify with it. Understand that this is just an old, worn-out mental program that automatically repeats in your mind. You are not these thoughts. You are the one who observes them. 2. Stop fueling the story of your suffering. Every time you dwell on grievances, rehash the story of your pain, you only intensify the wound, making it deeper. Stop and ask yourself, does this story empower me, or, on the contrary, does it make me weaker? If it weakens you, if it pulls you back, let it go. Free yourself from this burden. 3. Act against the desires of the ego. The ego strives to make you upset, feel offended, get stuck in negative emotions. But if you consciously choose calmness, react with inner distance, with acceptance, the ego loses its power over you. Counter its destructive impulses with constructive actions, and you will see its influence weaken. And then something truly transformative happens. You suddenly grasp the true nature of your ego, see it without embellishment or illusions. And in that moment, as if shackles fall away, the ego loses its power over you. You no longer slavishly cling to past grievances and emotional wounds. You no longer need desperate confirmation of your own importance from the outside, from other people. You stop feeling like a pitiful victim of ruthless circumstances. And it is at this moment that you are illuminated by a cruel but liberating truth. Suffering never stemmed from the events themselves, but only from your personal interpretation of what happened. The pain itself, of course, was real and tangible, but the tangled story that the ego wove around it became the very prison that held you captive in despair. In the next stage of our journey into the depths of self-knowledge, we will discover one of the most cherished truths about emotional healing. Pain does not disappear as a result of a fierce struggle against it, but only when we meet it with an open heart and a completely new understanding. And when this realization finally comes, you understand that healing is not a distant prospect, not a vague someday in the future, but a living process that you can begin to experience right now, in this very moment. Stop desperately resisting pain as if it were an enemy. Remember, what you persistently fight only becomes more entrenched and stays with you. One of the most fateful mistakes subtly instilled in us from childhood is the false notion that emotional pain is something terrible to be avoided at all costs, suppressed, or simply ignored. We were told, don't cry, pull yourself together, be strong, don't get upset over trifles. Unknowingly, we gradually learned to wage a merciless war against our own pain instead of trying to understand it, figure out its causes, and accept it as part of ourselves. But here's the inconvenient yet unavoidable truth. What you desperately reject doesn't disappear. It only intensifies. If you try to run from your pain, it will only magnify many times over, like a ghost haunting you. The more you suppress it, driving it deep inside, the more power it gains over you, controlling you from the shadows of your subconscious. The more stubbornly you refuse to feel it, the deeper it penetrates your body and mind, sinking its poisonous roots there. The great Carl Jung understood this truth like no other. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This means it's impossible to achieve healing by hypocritically ignoring your pain and pretending it doesn't exist. You must bravely face it head-on without fear or prejudice. Imagine a situation. You're suddenly pushed. What's your first instinctive reaction? Most likely you'll push back. We react the same way to emotional pain. Whenever we're overwhelmed by a wave of sadness, anger, or fear, and we desperately try to brush these feelings aside, We only fuel them, giving them new strength. It's as if we're driving our experiences deeper, suppressing them. We don't want to shed tears. We don't want to appear weak and vulnerable. So we start convincing ourselves that everything is fine, even if it's far from the truth. But the pain doesn't disappear. It continues to accumulate in our inner world like a heavy burden. We seek salvation in endless distractions, running from ourselves into work, into our phones, into social media, grasping at anything that can keep us away from facing this gaping inner void. But as soon as we're left alone with ourselves, everything returns with new, tripled force. We start looking for someone to blame, because our ego insists that the root of the problem lies outside, in the person who offended us, in an unfair fate. But as long as we look for answers somewhere outside, we'll never look inside ourselves, and therefore, we'll never be able to heal. This is a vicious cycle in which, unfortunately, a vast number of people are stuck. The irony is that it's not the pain itself that destroys us, but our desperate resistance to it, which makes it unbearable. Herein lies the key to breaking this vicious cycle. You must stop resisting and start consciously feeling your pain. This may seem paradoxical, but it's the only right path. Instead of running from pain, allow yourself to live it, to feel it to the fullest. Instead of suppressing it, simply observe it without judging yourself. If you feel sadness, let it flow, give it freedom. If you're overwhelmed by anger, don't deny it, but simply observe it from the side. This doesn't mean you should act impulsively, giving in to emotions. It only means you're giving your feelings space to exist without resisting. It is here that an amazing transformation unfolds. When a person fully surrenders to an overwhelming feeling, without trying to eradicate it or drive it deep inside, the agonizing pain gradually loses its power. One of the fundamental truths to deeply absorb is the impermanence of all things. No emotional state remains unchanged. No suffering lasts forever. However, by resisting pain, we only prolong its agony, creating unnecessary obstacles on the path to healing. Carl Jung, an eminent psychologist, emphasized the significance of inner transformation, an integral part of which is the awareness of the transient nature of all phenomena. Pain, like joy, is fleeting. It doesn't define our essence and doesn't stay with us forever. Remember the last difficult period of your life when it seemed there was no way out. And yet, today, you are here, enriched with new experience and a fresh perspective on the world. The same will happen with the pain you may be experiencing now. It will also pass. If you sincerely strive to break free from the chains of suffering, you can start with 3 simple steps. First, abandon the evaluation of your pain. Stop asking yourself questions like, "Why do I feel this way?" or "When will this end?" Just allow yourself to feel without attaching labels. It's not good or bad. It's just an experience you're having right now. Secondly, pinpoint the location of the emotion within your body. When you are overcome by fear, anger, or sadness, don't get lost in thoughts like, "This is unfair." Instead, direct your attention inward. Where exactly do I feel this? What physical sensations does it trigger? Observe these sensations without fighting them. Thirdly, breathe through the feeling. Instead of clenching your teeth and holding back, breathe deeply and evenly, allowing the emotion to freely pass through you. Nothing more is required. Simply be present with what is in this moment. When you learn to allow pain rather than fight it, something incredible happens. You realize that it has no power over you, not because it instantly disappears, but because you stop giving it that power. At that moment, you cease to be a victim of your suffering and transform into a person who is worthily passing through it, demonstrating maturity and inner strength. True strength lies not in resisting life, but in accepting it in its entirety, with all its joys and sorrows. The vast majority of people spend their allotted time fleeing from suffering, unaware that the key to genuine freedom lies in bravely facing their fears and anxieties. And when that moment arrives, when you abandon futile attempts to resist and consciously immerse yourself in the abyss of pain, a surprising truth will unfold before you. Pain is not your adversary. Its purpose is not to destroy you, but to transform you, to become a catalyst for your inner transformation. Once you realize this, you will forever be free from the fear of it. The next step is to learn to transform your suffering into a source of strength. As soon as you stop fighting, pain will become your tool for growth, an inexhaustible resource for inner development that you may not have even dreamed of. And then you will see that healing is not only possible, it is inevitable, an alchemical process set in motion within you. By this point, you will have firmly grasped that resistance only intensifies pain, fleeing from it only exacerbates it, and acceptance is the first step on the path to liberation. But there is something even more powerful that you can do with your suffering. Turn it into your greatest strength. Carl Jung, more than anyone else, revealed the essence of this process, calling it inner alchemy. Ancient alchemists sought to transform lead into gold, but Jung understood that true alchemy is not a material process, but a psychological and spiritual one. Lead is our pain, our fears, our deepest wounds. Gold is the wisdom, maturity, and strength that we gain when we use pain as a springboard for inner growth. Therefore, the main question is not how to avoid suffering, but how to use it to become a stronger, wiser, and freer version of yourself. Reflect on this statement. The most outstanding individuals whose wisdom about life evokes admiration did not reach such depths of understanding through a cloudless existence. On the contrary, they went through the crucible of trials, and it was suffering that became the catalyst for their transformation. Every painful experience is a kind of invitation to awaken, a unique opportunity to leave behind outdated beliefs and discover new horizons of awareness, resilience, and a deep connection with reality within yourself. Carl Gustav Jung, the distinguished psychologist, spoke of the dark night of the soul, a period when a person confronts their deepest inner pain but simultaneously receives a chance for radical transformation. This is that critical moment when the world around you seems to be collapsing and suffering becomes unbearable. However, if you do not succumb to despair at this moment, but ask yourself, what lessons can I learn from this experience? How can I use this pain for personal growth? Then you cease to be a passive victim of circumstances and become an alchemist capable of transforming your life. Every deep disappointment, painful loss, or betrayal is a kind of inner death. But many do not realize that this death is necessary for further development. What no longer serves passes into the past, false notions, illusions, outdated beliefs. And after that comes a new beginning, an opportunity to rethink yourself, to become stronger, more sincere, and deeper. Looking back, we understand that it was not moments of happiness that shaped us as individuals. It was the difficulties and challenges that forced us to surpass ourselves. This is where true transformation lies. Pain destroys the former image of oneself, shatters established beliefs, and forces one to look honestly in the mirror, to see those aspects of one's personality that we have long suppressed. And then we are faced with a choice: remain trapped in pain or move on, develop, and grow. The choice is always ours. There is a practical way to turn any pain into a source of inner strength. First of all, it is necessary to change your attitude towards it. Pain is not a curse, but an initiation, a rite of passage on the path to a new life. People who perceive their suffering as undeserved punishment condemn themselves to a bitter imprisonment within the walls of resentment and disappointment. Conversely, those who see it as a complex but fruitful process of personal growth emerge from trials renewed and tempered like steel in a furnace. Every painful experience is not just a chance occurrence, but a kind of examination, a life lesson designed to teach us something important. Instead of desperately asking, "Why me?" try asking yourself a different question. What is this experience trying to teach me? What hidden opportunities does it reveal? Secondly, turn your personal story into a source of inexhaustible strength. Look at those who, having gone through the deepest suffering, have managed to turn it into a powerful stimulus for inspiration and creation. At people rejected by society but found the strength to love themselves as they are. At those who were betrayed and deceived but learned to trust their intuition and inner voice. At those who, finding themselves at the very bottom, discovered hidden reserves and an inexhaustible willpower they never even suspected they possessed. Your story is your invaluable asset, but how you dispose of it, what conclusions you draw, and what lessons you learn depends solely on you. Thirdly, use pain as fuel to achieve your goals. Pain can break you, deprive you of the will to live, and plunge you into the abyss of despair, or it can become a powerful catalyst, a push to action, an impulse to move forward. It is up to you to decide in which direction it will lead you. If someone has hurt you, do not dwell on resentment and revenge. Direct this energy towards self-improvement and personal growth. If life has treated you unfairly, prove to yourself and the whole world that you are capable of overcoming any obstacles and achieving success despite everything. If loss has left you devastated and inconsolable, fill your life with a new, deeper meaning. The most successful people in this world have achieved recognition and prosperity not because they have never faced suffering, but because they have managed to transform their pain into strength, learned to grow and develop through trials. And this is within the power of each of us. When you sincerely live through suffering, analyze its causes, and draw valuable lessons from it, something truly amazing happens. You become immune to much of what hurt you before. You stop reacting painfully to the negative manifestations of others, because you begin to understand that their words and actions are merely a reflection of their own internal problems, which have nothing to do with you. You lose your fear of pain because you know that you are capable of enduring it and emerging from this trial even stronger and more confident. You become a person with a powerful aura, a person who has gone through the darkness and found their own light in it, illuminating the path for others. This is what the distinguished Swiss psychiatrist and philosopher Carl Gustav Jung called individuation, a complex and lengthy process of becoming oneself, finding one's true essence, freeing oneself from masks, fears, and the need for external approval. There comes a turning point when the endless spiral of mental anguish loses its power. You stop seeing your identity in suffering. The need to avoid or fear it disappears. Now they become your mentors, tools for further ascent. And then an amazing truth is revealed. Pain did not crush you, but tempered you, making you invincible. The choice is yours. Now you realize that pain is not an enemy to be run from, but a spark capable of igniting the deepest changes in your life. Two paths open up before you: to remain in the clutches of suffering, resisting, and seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, or to use them as a springboard to become stronger, wiser, and more unstoppable than ever before. Only one of these decisions leads to true freedom. Which one will you take? At this moment, two roads unfold before you. You can continue to allow pain to control your life, poisoning your thoughts, draining your energy, and stifling your growth. Or you can do what few dare to do. Use it as a catalyst for your transformation. As Carl Jung said, one cannot awaken without reaching the very bottom. Now that you have grasped the true nature of suffering, you have the power to decide what to do with it. The cycle of pain will only end when you take control, stop defining yourself through your suffering, and start using it as fuel for your development. When you realize that everything you have experienced was not a curse, but a kind of initiation, pain has power over you only as long as you resist it. The desire for independence from life's adversities is what distinguishes a person ready to take fate into their own hands. Once you make the firm decision to become the master of your life, no obstacles or suffering can break your spirit and stop you on the path to your intended goal. This decision becomes the starting point, the moment when inner strength and self-confidence prevail over any doubts and fears.